first guest, we have Tahmid Chowdhury, who is a writer, a coach, a policy professional who has worked across the UK government and an EU climate policy in Brussels. He's passionate about creating change and, of course, whether it's through sustainability or systems thinking or just helping others grow, he's always there to help. And to say the least, of course, Tahmid also comes from a family rooted in community service. His father, Ahmed Samad Chowdhury, Justice of the Peace, who is also the chairman of Channel S, runs clearly in working in community service. And of course, his son is no less than him. And we welcome him today on the show. Welcome, Tahmid, to the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. How are you today?
I'm good, thank you. You know, I'm not based in London these days, so I come home. Yeah, it's just, there's something very nice about coming home. My mum's cooking, a clean bed, warm house.
I think that's the best thing about coming home to like warm, like good food and then just clean bed, everything. Because my mum's visiting as well now, and I'm like, thank God for mum.
Yeah.
But I mean, because it is the Saturday show, it only makes sense to ask you, how has your Saturday been so far?
Pretty relaxing actually.
Yeah.
It's just nice to be at home. I'm not always here. I mean, I try and visit my parents quite regularly these days, so like at least once a month or so. I mean, I'm usually abroad, so there was just a bit of organising.
I'm jealous. I want to travel more as much as you do, but of course we'll go into more detail about that. So easy peasy, of course, start off. Where did you start your career in terms of like as a writer? Was that something you found when you were doing your A-levels? Where did that passion come from?
You know, it's funny that you mentioned about doing international MOOCs.
Yes.
So kind of A-levels, but when I got into university, I did a lot of Model United Nations. And so that's where I really learned the stuff of just, hey, going around and debating, thinking about international topics. So I think I kind of had that a little bit in the back of my mind. I went to study French and history. Honestly, it's actually easier to do a languages degree. The grades are lower, so I did that. And it also had that international element, so I could go for my year abroad in France. I went to Paris.
And what was that like, living abroad?
I think it was, I'd grown up in Bath. We grew up in Bath, and then Sheffield was quite a nice student city, but I went to Paris, and that was a real shift in terms of big city living. You know, we're not Londoners in terms of like where we grew up. I think we are now these days. But yeah, really quite challenging in terms of lots of people navigating different language. A little bit, I suppose, I saw it as part of what our parents had done back in the day. A little bit different, of course, but yeah, testing ourselves in a new environment, which I think can be a really great thing. Yes,
and moving abroad, of course, is that new environment. So once you finished your year abroad, what sort of route did you decide to take at the point? Because obviously I can say everything that I found from reading your CV, but I think I want to hear it from you.
Yeah, well, I think kind of getting that international element, it gave a really good opportunity to see, oh, there's some really interesting stuff going on. And I suppose I was part of that space where people say, oh yeah, you know, follow your passions and all this stuff. And I had an interest in doing something that was, policy related, as I say, lots of Model United Nations.
Yes.
And so I figured I wanted to shift a little bit more towards politics.
Okay.
And then I was fortunate enough to get an internship over the summer at a government department. So I worked in the Treasury for a couple of months. And I ended up doing a Master in European Studies
Amazing.
Pre-Brexit.
Wow. And I'm sure that was a different time to what we have right now post-Brexit. It's crazy out there.
A funny story actually is that I got a traineeship commission, so they do this thing called Blue Book, and I got, usually they're in Brussels, but I actually got the post here in London between March and July 2016. So I was a European Commission trainee during the Brexit referendum.
Oh, wow.
And I actually went into work the day after, and it was such a weird experience.
Okay, so give me an example of what weird might be when you were obviously when you went for the first day there.
Well, I think it was the period, so it was like I think as you know, British Bangladeshis, we learn to like navigate spaces where we have different identities. Yes. And so there I was a European sort of official, I mean, just as a trainee, but during sort of this big referendum time where there was lots of debates. And it was weird. I don't think anyone thought the vote would go like that. I remember I stayed up till like 2, 3 a.m. watching it. Yes. And then I walked into work the next day.
And that was it?
Yeah, it was
wow.
a bizarre thing.
I think what's more interesting is, of course, having done your A levels, then going into university, a year abroad, and then finding yourself, working in this commission, after during Brexit. What I think I'm more interested in knowing is how those experiences kind of shaped your ability to be there. Because I think what we find difficult right now, at least at my age or just people younger than me, is that there's not enough opportunities for all of us. There's a lot of competition out there. What can make us stand out? What made you stand out in those applications?
Well, I mean, I'll answer the question and then kind of give some reflections on it.
Yes.
So I think one thing, for better or for worse, was really learning that it's a game. I think we can get so caught up in the idea that, yes, there's a particular thing you have to do and self-betterment. That is really critical for our lives. But ultimately, like, say, the civil service, you have to score points. And so learning the system and really getting good at doing interviews and things like that. So there's just a little bit of a thing that at one point I just honestly turned the brain off and just said, play the game. And yeah, is that fair? Is it not? I don't know. But like, if we work in an imperfect world, it's better to work with it. Now, having said that, coming a bit later in terms of, okay, career progression, some years in government, and then moving on in EU policy, etc. There is something about, if we have to try so hard for something, it's probably not super in alignment. So when I was in government, I felt this tension, and actually even more so in Brussels, where I kind of had these principles. We grew up as British Bangladeshis. We have our influence of our, ancestral lands from our parents, etc. And what we're surrounded with is a very different culture that isn't as open as actually we think it is from the outside. So we just have to navigate that, I think.
Right. And so what was it like growing up at home and then obviously wanting to do that year abroad? Because I know a lot of my friends would struggle to go do a year abroad. Was that something that you had faced problems with at the time, or no?
I think it was the first time where I really saw myself or questioned something like identity. Because I think growing up in the UK, I mean, even in Bath, which is quite a, predominantly white space, it's not something I really actively questioned. But it was a moment, and it was a bit different, even now it's changed, but going to France and people being like, oh, British cuisine, you eat fish and chips and rubbish food. And I'm like, it's not what we do at home.
No, of course.
So it was a real learning of like, oh, what really is my identity? And yeah, I mean, I could talk a long time about it, but it's kind of a bit of a hero's journey. You go through it. I think a lot of us grow up kind of questioning this, where do we fit? And at some point, I think if we've done the healing, we come to the point where we're like, oh, actually, I do want to learn more about my own sort of, my parents, my culture, and our history. I think it comes to us.
No, of course. And of course, that having said that, writing is a passion that you clearly have worked on quite a lot. You work on policy, EU policy. So is that passion for writing something that just came naturally after that?
I think when I was working in government, I started, after a while, managing people, and I really enjoyed that human aspect. And I think that came, it's kind of like a thing that actually I realized that was probably as much my strength as the, getting into the nitty-gritty of policy writing. And so I just wanted to learn more about that. And so I ended up doing a coaching qualification. And part of that was starting to share my insights. I think we all have personal, like, when we really go deep in ourselves, we learn so much about our own particularities. And I just have a lot of thoughts that come about. And so just finding a way to harness that and just put it down on paper, that's what I do. So I write an article each week. Haven't written the one this week, but I will tomorrow.
I'm sure you will.
And one of my proudest achievements, actually, I went through a period at first, lots of energy and then kind of burnt out. But then since January 2022, I haven't missed a week. So in about the last 3.5 years, I've done an article each week.
Okay, that's amazing. That's an amazing record to have. But burnout is a real issue that we all deal with, I'm sure. So how do you deal with burnout?
So I think this is where it gets deeper with the personal development side. So I kind of with this mix of doing things that I thought was really impactful and serving, and then the realities of working in a big machine, it was quite challenging. And so actually in 2024 was a period where I did have a burnout. And honestly, I think it's just going to become more prevalent. I think we have to really take care. And then it was just really going to the roots. I've been really connected with the coaching world, and a coach actually told me, it's like, he referenced an article that was burnout or mutiny of the soul.
Right.
And I think a lot of us, perhaps people watching, we have this moment where we do what we got told what we're meant to do. But we see that there is a misalignment in terms of like that, well, is this really helping? Is this really what I was put on this earth to do? And yeah, I think sometimes life gives a little nudge, sometimes it gives a shove.
Yes.
And I think for me, that was the real like catalyst to shift into, okay, look, what I really want to do is help people.
Yes.
Let's get away from the big machine and the political talk. And yeah, just go in front of people, help people. So now these days when I coach people, it's just, yeah, particularly one-to-one with clients, and let's go really into the depths of, yeah, what are the struggles? And 99, 100% of the time, it's really within as opposed to everything else outside.
When we say coaching, it's a big general term,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So what specifically do you coach for?
So I work with a few people, and I think there's lots of different terms, but essentially, like, I have my own interpretation. So, my boss, he wrote a book actually and talked a lot about like what my grandfather did.
Yes.
And what I realized, this is just like a modern term of what we've had for generations of, hey, actually really sitting down and going further and helping people with their problems. So it can be personal life, it can be, whatever, career, relationships.
So like a mentor?
Yes, in the sense that it can, but my role's not to give advice in the sort of, I sometimes if it's helpful, but we grew up in an Asian family, we get a lot of advice. So
yes,
I think
true.
sometimes it's important to understand just being there for someone, like saying, hey, look, these are some options, I will support you either way. And sometimes it's some tough love and saying, hey, look, there is something right in front of you that you're not seeing, like, avoiding that difficult conversation with your spouse or, actually being honest with yourself that your career is not fulfilling you. And yeah, sometimes you just need someone to prompt that. And
that's good. Because sometimes unsolicited advice comes and you're just like, where has that come from? So no, that definitely is a good trait to have, especially as a coach, I think, because I've had so many coaches sometimes and I'm like, why are you saying that to me? Of course, that is really respectful. But I mean, having worked on EU policy, what's one of the works that you've done that you're just like, I'm so proud of it, I talk about it all the time?
I mean,
because you've done so much, that's the thing.
What is interesting is that the things, when we get a little bit of wisdom, and I'm still gaining that.
I think we all are.
Yeah, well, precisely. The things that we're really proud of aren't quite the ones that sound flashy. Like the flashy thing I could say, I didn't. So we wrote this report on a thing called Digital Product Passports. It was in the European Parliament. So I basically moderated a debate in the European Parliament. It's cool. I got the live stream. There was a member of the European Parliament on my right, all that stuff. It's cool. It was good. But in terms of like proudest achievement, I mean, the fact that I did self-publish a book on, so it was called Make Diversity Matter to You. And that was, it was a side project really, I had my career at the time.
But it's still an amazing project to be able to publish a book.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
And in particular, it was to specifically look at, hey, how can we bring that coaching approach? Like there's a lot of, you should care about this and should care about that. But
right.
I think some of us, well, all of us need to go on a journey to actually care about things. And so, yeah, I just had the idea. I wrote the book. Well, I wrote 20,000 words and then got stuck and then came back for it a year later.
And you just started writing that book. You finished writing that book and it's been great since.
Yeah, it's
amazing.
Cool,
It's not just cool. It's not just cool. It's the words are great, amazing. You're being humble, is what you're being. But of course, I think what stood out to me is the career progression that you've had over the few years that, of course, you've been working. And I think what's more interesting, at least for me, was seeing how you've developed into the person that you are today. How much of your career has impacted your personal growth, would you say?
I think I look at it holistically, like when life is going good, it kind of ticks along and we find momentum. I'm starting to feel like that's happening again, so I'm content at the moment, but after a long period of like challenge and frustration.
Right.
And so career, I had development and something like I project managed a legislative bill and it was like a mess of a bill, to be honest. And that is stressful and it was really political and all this, and there was a team of 30 people and it wasn't done how it was meant to on the book.
Oh,
so yes, naturally that did bring growth. But I think it was as much the other way around of realizing if I'm relying on my career for my growth, then it's quite reactive. And actually I want a life more rich than that.
Yes.
Even if, working in government was enriching to an extent, although there was a reason I left. It gave, it gives some things, but I want to explore, do other things. There's more to life.
And having said that, I mean, you did the side project, you wrote a book, you said, of course, make diversity matter to you. Now, that whole sentence means a lot. Diversity can mean many things. So what was the message that you were hoping to share with others when you wrote the book?
So I think it was two things. It was prompted by Black Lives Matter, actually.
Yes.
What I saw was you get people that work in diversity that are very passionate. And that's great. But if you go to someone being like, you need to care about this and, you know, how dare you not, it's pretty off-putting. So on the one hand, it was for people bringing a message that is a bit softer and a bit easier and more accessible. But also, I think there are more people who, you know, your typical white guy or whatever, who does want to understand more but doesn't really know how.
Yes.
And it was really the message of the more that we understand about ourselves, the easier it is to really navigate this stuff. Like, I have a very honest opinion that, you know, my first internship in the Treasury was a summer diversity program. And I was like, I don't really get this. This seems a bit pointless. Until I went into the workplace and I just saw the weird way it works. And I realized, oh, yeah, you probably do need these things, even if they're an imperfect tool. So it was kind of following on that vein.
Right. And where can, I mean, those watching find the book?
Amazon, it's a
big advert here, guys.
Yes, and I did also kind of do a compilation of my blogs at the end of last year as well as a book. So that's also available. But really, look, there's a lot of books out there. I'm not going to make real money on it, so it's not really about that. But it's
I don't
sharing.
think it's not the money as well. It's just the message.
Yeah,
it's quite important. I think when I look at diversity in my firm, I'm just like, oh, I'm just one of the percentage that's been added, and I'm just that other brown person that's been added to a very white firm. But it's an important part of what we do right now. Diversity does matter, especially now with the population that we have in the UK. If it doesn't reflect that, it's a question that we must ask HR and so on and whatnot. So I think what's really important for me as well also is your role in convening the task force for climate neutral and circular products. What does it involve?
Yeah, so this was, I mean, it's not what I do right now, it's what my last role was, but it was a really interesting mix. And talking of career, so basically the idea was to bring progressive companies together to advocate on sustainability. It's one of these realities that if we just try and advocate from a purely oh yes, everyone for the climate needs to do everything in a very extreme way, and then not bring the realities that you have to work with businesses to make that shift. There's a creative tension there. And so this was looking to say, hey, actually, the big businesses realize that you do need to change things. And so actually some of them are really on the cutting edge of it. Mm-hmm. So from a personal perspective, it was an interesting mix. It was a challenge. I think Brussels is just it's a bit like a circus of headless chickens running around. There's so much policy and noise. But trying to do something meaningful with that. And that's where we did that report that I mentioned in the European Parliament. We did this one on digital product passport. We did some others. And I mean, it's important to be humble and philosophical. It's not going to magically shift and change everything overnight. But bringing real expertise where in a very technical field, the quick thing about policy is there's just loads of it. And you just realize it's so confusing. But if I can advance something even a little bit and make that accessible and usable, then that's going to do a lot of good. So we had some startups come up and oh yeah, I read your report. And it's someone actually read it.
Of course. Big impact. No, that's amazing. I mean, I think it's so hard to cover anyone's career in 15 minutes. But of course, I've had the great pleasure of interviewing you today. So thank you so much for being on the show. But before you go, welcome. What we do is we always pass on another question for the next guest coming on the show. So I was just wondering if you could write a question for our next guest on the clipboard next to you.
Yeah, sure.
And whilst we do that, of course, I will thank you for your time, for being so humble and patient with me today. I appreciate that. 15 minutes is not enough to cover your whole career, but I've learned a lot. And of course, if there is a last message that you want to give on to the audience, just about generally what you've learned.
Yeah, sure. And I'll keep it brief because otherwise I think I'm overstaying my welcome.
No.
But I think it's just so important to, keep on ticking along with life. I think we can get so caught up, particularly when we're growing up, oh, that career, and then magically everything will be smooth sailing. Yeah, life is like it's a magical journey. And I think the more that we can just stay grounded within ourselves and really do the work inside, that's where the rewards will come, because you don't want the rewards, but because the world will give them to you when you stop needing and craving. And so the more that we can go into that energy, I think the greater and more amazing things you, me, anyone can do.
No, that's beautiful. Thank you so much for being on the show today.